What is your take on the $2 million deficit in this year's budget?
That's a good question. I mean, I know the department heads and the city manager and so forth have looked through the budget and cut down. I mean, I think they're about $1 million less than what they had budgeted last year, or cuts as far as the budget goes. But to budget for a $2 million deficit, I mean, it's kind of like your household. I mean, you only spend what you make, and so if you're spending and you're projecting to spend $2 million more than what you're taking in, that's a real concern to me. And I don't think any city council wants to inherit a $2 million deficit. But looking into those numbers a little bit closer, you know, in 2009 the projected deficit was also a little bit over $2 million as well. So the department heads, they look into those numbers, and they're usually projecting their income and revenues low, and projecting the expenditures high, which is good. I mean, that's good business, that's good sense. And so, you know, in 2009, that $2.2 million deficit actually was only $297,000 in actual figures, which makes me feel a little bit more at ease. However, you know, my personal budget, a business or a personal budget, I never want to be budgeted in the red. To me, that doesn't make fiscal sense, and is not economic responsible. But having said that, I understand where they're coming from. I understand the tough decisions that are made and have to be made in order to balance that budget. When the revenues are not there and the expense is still there, there's some very difficult decisions that have to be made. So that's kind of where I stand on that. Thanks.
In that same vein, would you favor a balanced budget requirement for the city?
You know, looking forward, I don't really see a problem with that. I mean, you would think that to tap into the reserves of the city, city reserves shouldn't be something that's planned. It should be more of an emergency fund, in my opinion. You know, when you set up a personal account, or you set up, you know, your emergency funds in your own personal business or in your family, for example, you don't plan on using those. I mean, the plan is for an emergency. And I think the reserve funds for the city should be also set up the same, with that same philosophy, that same mentality, that these are reserve funds. They're supposed to be, you know, only utilized in case of emergency, not to be planned to utilize those, or, you know, to use them as part of the budget plan. I know that's, you know, on the national level and the federal level, it's got us into big, serious trouble. You know, we're balancing budgets off a $1.1 trillion deficit. That's not, to me, that's not a budget.
Along in the same lines, in order to balance the budget, if you're elected, would you vote for a tax increase?
Well, I think history has proven that tax increase is probably the worst thing you can do to help create wealth and help create revenue. To increase taxes on an economic downturn puts an added stress on to families and individuals. Yeah, it may generate on paper an increase, but when there's a decrease in population, all of a sudden that increase of numbers of individuals you're taxing still ends up being a decrease. So I would not look at that revenue. I would not look at the increase in taxes in order to balance the budget on that, especially on an economic downturn.
Okay. How about and sometimes this is the free pass. Same question on licenses and permits. Would you favor increasing, or would you vote in favor of increasing permits and license fees?
You know, I think that, yeah, like you said, it's the same line of questioning. There again, there's alternative resources that we need to tap into before we look at it hurting the individuals that are already bringing in money into the city and already struggling. I mean, there's a lot of businesses that are hanging on by their fingernails. I mean, it's tough right now out there to be a businessman in any kind of market. And if we increase fees and taxes and so forth, it doesn't make any sense. The businesses that are out there that are barely hanging on are no longer going to be able to continue to do business, and it's going to be a detriment to the city. There's other assets. There's forms and methods to bring in revenue. There's a much more successful, in my opinion, than increased taxes and fees.
Okay. Changing subject a little bit. Would you vote to bring back Tim Hacker as city manager?
You know, the reason the government's set up in the way it is to balance powers and have checks and balances. Well, we've seen that exercise, a 3-2 vote to discontinue the relationship with the city manager. That vote's spoken, and Tim Hacker's no longer with the city. I can't see overturning that vote would be prudent, in my opinion. I think we need to move forward and move on. Whether I agreed with the timing of that or not, it's really irrelevant. We have to agree with the decision that was made by the majority of the city council that represents the public, and move forward.
Okay. How do you feel, extending that a little bit, how do you feel about possibly even eliminating the city manager position?
Well, I think that question's really loaded, and that's a really critical question that the public, in my opinion, needs to answer. What form of government do we want to utilize? What form of government do we want to govern ourselves with? And to me, to have a city council or a mayor determine that crucial decision, I think that needs to be left up to the public. Let's get the public educated on what kind of council government that they want, whether it's going to be a council management or a strong mayor and council type of a management program. And bring the pros and cons and debate the issues and bring that to the public and have them vote on that decision and decide what the public wants and how they want to be governed. It's not the city council governing the city body. It's the public. And the public needs to be aware of what of what format's going to work the best for the city of Mesquite. In my opinion, that's not something the city council should determine on their own. That should be something that's going to be left up to the public. We talked about moving the voting to November, to have everybody vote in November. And the city council, I think, has made a wise decision. Is, hey, this should be something that's left up to the voters to decide on themselves. And if something and relatively is small in comparison, and now we put in how we want to be governed as a city and let a city council determine that, I think that definitely needs to be left up to the public, and they need to vote on what direction that they want, what form of government that they want to be used to manage them, and to use as a form of government.